Welcome to a special edition of Icon Fetch. I'm Tony Peters. Tommy Keene passed away on November 22nd, 2017, at the all-too-young age of 59. I never had a chance to meet Tommy, but I did have the unique opportunity of interviewing him on 5 different occasions for my Icon Fetch podcast. And when you're grieving for someone, sometimes it's just good to hear their voice again. So what I thought I would do is splice up the best of those audio interviews, and I thought it was also a good opportunity to reach out to other people. I didn't think it was right to contact some of Tommy's family in a time of grief, but I did reach out to Peter Buck of R.E.M., who both bands got to know each other traveling up and down the East Coast in the early 80s. Guy Picciotto, a member of Fugazi, who ran in the same circles with Tommy in the Washington, D.C. music scene. Ted Niceley, who played bass in Tommy's first solo band, plus helped produce the first couple of albums. Dwight Twilley, who Tommy lended some guitar parts to on one of Dwight's albums. Plus, I reached out to Josh Grier of Dolphin Records, who signed Tommy's band and released Places That Are Gone and Back Again Try EPs. Plus Stephen Judge, who ran Second Motion Records, which is now School Kids Records, the last record label that Tommy recorded it. For those wanting background on Tommy Keene's early years, I suggest going to TommyKeene.com. There, his older brother Bobby penned a heartfelt tribute, and you can learn a lot about Tommy's early life there. In one of the interviews I did with Tommy, he talked about seeing The Who when he was 9 years old. So I asked him how on earth that was possible.
Well, I had an older brother, and my dad was really cool. And in those days, it was a different world. These shows were all at Constitution Hall, which is downtown D.C. It's a pretty big place. It holds about 3,800 people, and they still have shows there, and they've never stopped. It's a beautiful hall. My dad would drop us off, and he'd say, "Okay, meet me here, right here. I'll pick you up at 11:30 or so." But it was amazing, of course. The Who Sellout. I didn't have Sellout yet, but that's really kind of the tour. They only did like Tattoo and Relax.
Interesting. Okay.
Yeah, but I only had the first 2 records, and the most famous thing of that evening is that after the Trogs and before the Who, the DJs used to always MC these things, came out and said, "We have an important announcement. Lyndon Baines Johnson has decided he will not rerun for the presidency."
Wow.
Like a historic night, March 31st. And everyone clapped, right? What were they thinking? Then they got Nixon.
Right, yeah. And so this wasn't even, you sound like this wasn't even your first concert at 9. You saw...
No, I saw the year before, I saw a Dave Clark 5.
Okay.
And then, I'm trying to think, I saw the Beach Boys and Buffalo Springfield, the same venue.
Wow.
I saw Gary Puckett in the Union Gap with the Box Tops opening with Chilton.
Nice, Alex Chilton, right.
And I still have a little picture. Those days you could just walk down from the stage and take a flashbulb picture.
Wow.
Yeah, let's see what else. Love and Spoonful. Yeah, that was about it. And then we started, and then in 69 I saw Zeppelin, and that's a whole nother story.
Nice. Great.
But, those days you could do that. You could drop children off. Do you know what I mean? I mean, it's not, we were in a gang, right?
Right, sure.
So my brother was older. He was 12, I think, and it was a different world.
Peter Buck, guitarist for R.E.M., met Tommy Keene in the early 80s, and one of the things that really bonded them as friends is those mutual concert experiences. Here's Peter Buck.
We just had bonded because we're hanging out and drinking all night long, talking about the fact that him living in Washington and me living in Atlanta, we saw the exact same shows within a week of each other. I mean, just literally, did Elvin Bishop open for the Kinks in Atlanta for you? Yeah. That kind of crap.
There's a great story about Tommy and his brother seeing Led Zeppelin in 1969 when Tommy was all of 10 years old. That's also at TommyKeene.com. Flash forward a few years, and bassist Ted Niceley, who played in Tommy's solo band, talks about the first time he met Tommy Keene.
Well, he was in a band called The Rage in Maryland. You know, Tommy, I think, might have been going to UNM at the time. And this place that was pretty popular called the Varsity Grill, right there on the Strip in College Park. And his band opened up for my band, the band I was in rather, called the Raz, which was a very, very, very popular band. And we lost the guitarist. So I just called him up and I said, you know, we're interested in seeing if you're interested in playing with us.
You can run, but you can hide. You expect one to get 3 to 5. They don't know the answer, so don't criticize.
Guy Picciotto of Fugazi became aware of Tommy Keene during his tenure with the Raz as well.
Well, Tommy, anyone who was like grown up in D.C. in the late 70s, early 80s, and involved even tangentially in like new music in the town or whatever, was aware of Tommy through his first band, the Raz, which was the first time I ever saw Tommy on stage. I think I was like 12 or 13 years old, and I was starting to go to shows, and I saw the Raz open for the Ramones movie. The Rock and Roll High School film played in town, and they had a bunch of local bands open the show. And it was Raz and another group from D.C. called the Slicky Boys, and I remember being completely blown away by the Raz. Like, just they had this really cool kind of Cheap Trick, kind of R&B new wave thing happening, and they were just, you know, so at that point, a lot of kids my age were talking about the Raz as like the cool band in town, and then their 7 inches came out, and we all bought those, and we followed the group.
Eventually, things went south for the Raz. Here once again is Ted Niceley.
The Raz broke up. We were pursuing record deals, and I think the Raz was kind of like a very democratic songwriting type of thing. Long story short, we weren't getting signed. We broke up, and Tommy, I think, went to New York to hang out for a while. Somehow he ended up playing with this girl who signed to Casablanca Records, Suzanne Fellini.
Okay.
And she had a hit with the song Making Love on the Phone.
It's so hard being almost alone and lying here in the dark. Making love on the phone. Love on the phone. Making love on the phone.
He got in the touring band that also had Kenny Aronson in it. He played bass with like Derringer. He played bass with Bob Dylan. So they toured everywhere for a year. And then they formed a band called Pieces with Frankie LaRocca from the David Johansen Band and a singer who was basically the main guy.
Okay.
And tried to get signed for a year, and it blew up. And then he came home, and we were talking off and on during all this stuff. And I was producing some things locally, and he said, "Hey," and I had, been pretty much the studio nerd for Raz recordings, and he said, I want to record some demos.
Okay.
Are you and our old drummer Doug interested? And therefore, Strange Alliance. The demos that became Strange Alliance got recorded.
Strange Alliance was Tommy Keene's first step as a solo artist, but as he told me back in 2013, he's not too wild about it now.
Well, I mean, I'm a little bit about it. It was my first record, and I find it a little difficult to listen to vocally, especially. But a lot of people like it.
Strange Alliance did give Tommy and band a chance to play quite a bit in the D.C. area and up and down the East Coast. And it did catch the attention of several different record labels.
We played a lot around the D.C., Virginia, Baltimore area, and we would make these trips up to New York. We had major labels check us out, and I remember going up to New York and doing these showcases, which were very intimidating and scary in a kind of a dark rehearsal studio for one A&R guy. And we did a bunch of those, and a bunch of people came down to D.C. to check us out. obviously with no success. My manager knew a guy in Boston who worked for a marketing firm called Side One, and they were in New York and L.A., and they had a label out of Durham, or the Triangle area in North Carolina,
Right.
and a young, hip, smart lawyer, rock fan who ran it.
That young lawyer was Josh Grier of Dolphin Records out of Durham, North Carolina, and here he talks about what led to the signing of Tommy Keene.
We heard the 6-song tape that became the EP. It was sent to me as a cassette. I can't remember now. Somebody, obviously, I didn't know him, and I didn't know Seth, who was his manager at the time, and somebody recommended that he get in touch with us. I can't recall who it was. But,
Okay.
we got that tape, and that was one of those tapes that you get that you know immediately that it's great. And so I think part of the reason that he made the deal with us, we were an indie label. We were fine with putting it out the way it was.
Right, right.
We were more than fine with that, and we weren't like, let's add songs or let's record more or any of that. It was, this is great the way it is. Tommy Keene was simultaneously, and not with any of our help, I want to point out, building a huge reputation in the D.C. area. And because bands in that era rode a circuit from Athens up to, I guess, about as far as Boston, playing, clubs like the 930 and the Cat's Cradle and Maxwell's, people got to know Tommy because he was on the circuit too.
Here, Tommy echoes that sentiment.
They were looking for something that we had sort of a fan base.
Right.
And they released this EP, and college radio back then really took to it because we were sort of in the right place at the right time. The only time in my career I have been, because this whole sort of mid-Atlantic southern pop thing was going on with R.E.M, Let's Active,
Yep.
DBs. Well, DBs were a little earlier. And for once, I was sort of in vogue.
Peter Buck of R.E.M. heard the Places That Are Gone EP very early on.
He was on Dolphin Records, and I was given the single the day it came out. That was Make Your Record in Raleigh. It was either Murmur or from Record Egg. Yeah, and I just thought, what the fuck is this? This is unbelievable. And I just totally freaked out, and I called, and I actually talked to this guy at the record company that I think you do. She said, this is great. I mean, does he have his songs like that? Yeah, I go, what does he look like? Does he weigh like 300 pounds? I mean, why'd you ever heard of this guy? He's young, and he had a band that was a misfire or something, I don't know. But he's really got it going now. And so I believe I heard demos and, got the EP.
Peter Buck wasn't the only one paying attention. It became a hit on college radio. It got 4-star review in Rolling Stone, and it topped the annual Village Voices Paz and Jop poll. I asked bassist Ted Niceley if he was surprised at all those accolades.
I don't think that, we didn't take anything for granted, we had no reason to not think that Dolphin was capable of doing what they did, I think that's why we did it with them, we needed to do it with someone. So I think getting 4 stars in Rolling Stone pretty much blew our shit away. I think that getting, Paz and Jop Award pretty much blew us away. We were blown away by, all the positive stuff. It gave us a lot of confidence. But, we thought it's great stuff. Why wouldn't they?
Right. Josh Grier, owner of Dolphin Records, feels the same way.
We always thought we had something special. We were arrogant little punks,
Right.
Who, just thought we were smarter than everybody in the music business, just waiting around for our chance. Tommy had the full package. He not only could write songs, he could sing great. He had, he was power pop, which I love. One thing it's often pointed out, because Robert Christgau loved Tommy Keene, and the Village Voice, which was very powerful at that time, did support that record pretty significantly. But who really supported it was college radio, which is also something that I guess is now an anachronism. But at the time, college radio stations, there was many of them. It was a thing. They had their own tip sheets. They had the New Music Seminar, which was basically built around college radio. CMJ, I think people probably don't even know what those letters stand for, but there was College Media Journal, which was what's called a tip sheet, which was all about college radio play. And college radio loved that record.
We're walking down the same old street, feelings never quite complete. Yeah, you've heard it said before that nothing happened yesterday. Nothing happens anyway. It doesn't matter what you say to me.
After the success of the Places That Are Gone EP, Dolphin Records wanted to take it to another level. Here once again is Tommy Keene.
So what the idea that Dolphin's plan was, let's do a full album and let's get us kind of a named producer. And Don Dixon had done the 2 R.E.M. records with Mitch Easter, so he was on board. They wanted another person, so T-Bone Burnett kind of entered the picture. And he had just finished producing the Los Lobos record. He did a lot of sort of under-the-radar producing in the 70s, like he did Maria Muldaur and all kinds of people like that.
Right. Josh Grier talks about why they chose Don Dixon and T-Bone Burnett.
Yeah, Dixon was, Dolphin didn't have a staff, really. It was me and one other person, and Don was our freelance producer. If he didn't produce the records that we were doing, he kind of helped oversee them. So Don knew how to make records. He had been in a band called Arrogance that had a brief period on the major, and he was older than the rest of us, which in that part of your life means he was probably 2 years older than me.
Right, exactly.
But he was old. He was the older guy that knew things too, and he had made Murmur, which was a record that we all just adored. And so what happened was T-Bone Burnett was a cult figure at that time. T-Bone was, had the swagger, and he was, we felt like we were a little bit of hayseeds down there, so we brought this guy in that really knew the business, and we took him to Reflection Studio, which was the only studio in North Carolina that was 24-track.
Wow.
All the other studios were 8-track or less. When we went in to make songs from the film, we went to Reflection, which was a studio that was primarily supported by gospel recordings that had money and were made in North Carolina at the time. And Dixon knew the room, and Dixon was friends with the guy that owned the studio. And so Don was initially not supposed to be the producer. He was kind of like the engineer.
Gotcha. Okay.
And also he was, again, kind of my eyes and ears in the studio, because we had taken all the money the label had ever made and put it into one record. and T-Bone was, I had no control over that guy. And, this is the first time I had to worry about somebody getting a hotel room that they were satisfied with.
Right.
And when you worked at Mitch's studio, you stayed in a tent out in his parents' yard.
Nice.
It was true. So Tommy came down, and they didn't really get along very well, those two guys. And Dixon, was the sort of the glue that pulled that record together and got it finished, if you ask me. I mean, I was not a record label executive that ever wanted to be in the studio. I didn't think it was the right place. I just thought I got in the way. So I didn't watch them make the record. The one time I visited, I could feel some tension. But Don got it finished, and T-Bone was the producer. And
from those sessions, Dolphin released another EP featuring the fantastic single, Back Again Try. Ted Niceley thinks that was a pivotal moment for the band.
When Dolphin released Back Again Try,
Right.
and it got #1 CMJ record, that pretty much sealed the deal. That was when some real shit started happening. I'd have to say it was mainly because the song and was just so immaculate. I mean, that's really, I think, my favorite song. I told Tommy, I said, you know what this is? This is like a fucking Holly song.
Right, yeah.
When the goddamn chorus comes in, man, you are like, you're just, I mean, for me, I'm like, this is like a Holly song, you know? I mean, it takes my breath away.
So won't you try to make it right, falling from my pride, let me back inside.
That's when things really started to heat up. Here once again is Tommy Keene.
We recorded the album with T-Bone and Don in summer of '84. In August, we did the New Music Seminar in New York, which was sort of like what South by Southwest is now.
Right.
You know, everyone went to New York for this big music convention. And we had been talking to some people and A&R people, and long story short, this guy who worked at Elektra, Tom Zutot, his assistant saw us, and he came to see us in October in D.C. that year, and we just walked back in the dressing room and said, "Welcome to Elektra Records."
Huh, okay.
So it was this sort of like fairy tale dream come true. Called me up 2 months later and said, "Wait, I'm changing companies. I'm going to Geffen, so now you're going to be on Geffen Records."
Huh.
So in the meantime, though, he said, "But I don't want this T-Bone Burnett Dixon record coming out."
Huh, okay.
If you put it out, the deal is off.
Wow, okay.
Here we are going, all right, this might be our only chance. So we worked out something with Dolphin where they would get royalties, but these people that had been planning this plan for a year or so were very unhappy. It ended not too well.
Looking back on things, Dolphin Records owner Josh Grier wasn't surprised that Tommy signed to a major label.
Tommy wanted to go to a major. I mean, that was never a thing. He didn't want to be an indie artist his whole life. He always had aspirations to be a star, and he looked like a star, and he was a star. So fine. He never came to me and said, "Man, I love this indie thing. I just want to stay here the rest of my life." Yeah,
Right.
Jeff Tweedy never said that to me either. You know,
Right.
I mean, they aspired to be, sort of bigger than an indie label could ever do, because we
Right.
were pretty sure it was going to be sold.
Interesting, really, okay. I mean,
Yeah. What we didn't know is that they would re-record it. I think that was our naivete. We thought
right.
we made a great super record, and that they would take it and they would, fly us all out to L.A. and thank us on the back cover and all that stuff.
right.
Instead, they just bought the record, and that's the last we saw of anybody.
So they went from Dolphin to Geffen. Tommy Keene picks up the story.
We went ahead, signed with Geffen, then made the songs from the film record that came out in '86.
I swear that it's true. Yeah, my mother looked like Marilyn Monroe.
One of the biggest mistakes in my career was not saying to these people, "We've made this record, we're going to put it out. If you still want to work with us, great."
Right.
Because we had the Places That Are Gone EP was top 10 CMJ. We had a big buzz going, and we should have put this T-Bone Don Dixon record songs from the film out. Then, if they were still willing to go along with it, make the major label debut, because it just would have completely paved the way for, I think, better things.
Right. Instead, you took a bunch
And
of time
course,
off.
we're like, okay, we won't. And then
Right.
I think that was a big mistake.
And then the songs from the film that came out on Geffen was produced by Jeff Emmerich, a guy that was the engineer with the Beatles and that sort of thing.
Mm-hmm. I think the Emmerich record is very jangly, and we wanted a bigger rock tough sound.
Really? Okay. All right.
We really wanted to go in with someone like Bob Clearmountain and make a really loud, big rock record, but keep all the sort of folk rock influences and Beatlesque touches.
Right.
And that's something Emmerich did not achieve. That was why we had problems with the record, and the label, too. They wanted because live, we were always this loud, sort of raucous rock and roll band.
Right. Okay.
And that was sort of our thing. We're not like a wimpy, power pop, jangly, the band in that genre. We're
Right.
kind of we have those attractive tendencies, but we're a rock and roll band.
Right.
And we like to play loud and kick it out.
A rebel news that shook the world apart. Now I know you've been a long time missing, and the world won't listen to the long time missing in your life.
This guy has written books. He engineered Sgt. Pepper's, but you got to realize this guy produced and engineered Air Supply records. He gets all this kudos for
Right.
Imperial Bedroom,
Right.
which is my favorite Elvis Costello record.
Sure.
Which is why we hired him. But he did a lot of really crappy stuff.
Right.
You know, and that record suffered. It sounds like it. He didn't listen to the radio. He said, "I hate this loud, incessant snare drum you guys like," and that was what you needed to get on the radio in the '80s.
Right.
You needed this competitive sound before a program director would even consider adding your record.
Right.
I learned a valuable lesson. Don't find a producer whose records that he's produced you like. Find the producer that's going to get the sound you want.
Exactly. Yeah.
Ted Niceley thinks that part of the problem with songs from the film was where they recorded it in Montserrat.
We were in the studio and they tuned the drummer's drums like fucked up. I was like, I don't know how they ever got this sounds like shit. You know, we all were. Drummer had trouble playing them. The drums weren't tuned very, they just tuned loose. And, being stuck on an island making an album is not the way for a sophomore effort, It's just not good.
Well, it sounds like a good idea until you actually put it into practice, I think. So.
I don't think anybody ever thought it was a good idea.
Okay, all right.
I think we wanted to be in Los Angeles or ideally New York.
Right.
We were very unprepared.
Around that time, friend Peter Buck remembers Tommy having issues with the record label.
I think that he realized within about a week that he made a huge mistake. Yeah, I've got these great songs, and we're going to cut them, and it's going to be great. Those records weren't the records they should have been, And they had great songs, and you listen to them, but you go, I don't think Tommy needs modern drum sound and modern reverb. I mean, we're rock bands. I know that's old-fashioned, but you don't have to sound like every record on the radio, to get that hit.
Back to the Tommy Keene interview I did.
I was looking on YouTube, and I had never seen it before. I didn't realize that there actually was a video for "Listen to Me."
You gotta listen to me now.
Do you remember? Do you remember any of that? And obviously, it being a major label, you probably didn't have any creative control over that at all, right?
Well, the guy who did the video to Places That Are Gone, I became friends with. And you know the whole story about they didn't release Places That Are Gone as a single because there was a payola scam, and they had to drop all of the basically paying people to get records on the radio.
No, see, you didn't tell me that. Why don't you tell me that?
March 86, when the Places That Are Gone 7-inch single the video was released, I'd say end of February, and then 2 or 3 weeks later, the single, 7-inch of the single, Places That Are Gone, was supposed to come out. There was a huge payola scandal in the music business, and basically it was this operated by these two mafia guys who every major label paid, whether it would be money, cocaine, or hookers, to get their records played on the radio, and it was very illegal. Alan Freed, the guy who was instrumental in rock and roll and stuff, this is why he was ostracized from the music business, because it was all payola. Here, I'll give you $100. You play this record.
Right, but he was taking money. I don't know about hookers and,
Well, payola can be anything.
Right, yeah, obviously, right.
So, and there was tons of that going on. And so there was a big, he was indicted. So there was a big scandal. So all the major labels had to pull all the money, and they couldn't use these people for at least a period of 6 weeks. And right in that period was when my record was supposed to come out. So the head of promotion at Geffen called me up and he said, "This is terrible. This is bad timing. We're pulling the single because we can't do anything with it without this." So 6 weeks go by. You know, the guy's indicted and they're sent before the blah, 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 blah. And then they start business as usual. But then they've got on their schedule the next single.
Right.
So they can't go back to mine. Mine was dead in the water. It wasn't even released. So then they said, "Oh, okay, in 2 months we'll release another single." And that was a 7-inch 45 of Listen to Me. That's the single they picked, which I wouldn't have picked. So now we have to do another video. So they did sort of a cheap, for those days, video. I think, believe it or not, a video was $25,000.
Really?
Well, the Places video was $68.
Wow.
But most videos in those days were made for minimum $100,000. Oh yeah, because you had the whole, you had 25 people crew, you had a crane, you had makeup and blah blah blah, and
right.
I mean, you know, like Michael Jackson spent and Madonna would spend $1 million
right,
on their
right.
videos. That's
Yeah.
how important MTV was.
Right.
So, and you had to compete. So with me, I say now, oh, I spent $65,000 on a video. To them, that was bottom of the barrel.
Right.
And $25,000 was even more, you know, ridiculous. So to answer your question, which was the Listen to Me video, I had known the guy for a while, and we kind of came up with the storyboards and stuff. And it was done in his apartment, and then it was done with me driving around in a flatbed truck through the Los Angeles area of Hancock Park, which is kind of an old, a lot of movie stars lived there in the 30s and stuff. But the Places That Are Gone video got decent MTV airplay. Listen to Me video, the album was over with. They weren't working it, and it was just, maybe they played it, MTV played it, 10 times.
Right. So no, that the songs from the film came out, and then some months later they put out the Run Now EP, which was fascinating because that contained some of the T-Bone Burnett, Don Dixon leftovers.
Damage Control.
Right.
Seriously.
Right. And
let's get something out that sort of appeases the people that did not like songs from the film.
right. And then but it also appeased you. You said you wanted to work with Bob Clearmountain, and you did with Run Now then, right?
Well, we did this song because we were in a movie called Out of Bounds, and we did a song for the soundtrack. And the song came out on the soundtrack, and it was a bomb movie. It was terrible. It was a lot of fun to do, though. But the director said, for the scene in the movie where you guys are playing, there's some action going on, so can you write an ending or a vamp, a rave-up to the song? So that version was, we did that, and there's a really good, 2-minute lead break, rock-out, rave-up moment, which he needed for the movie. So that version never came out, was not on the soundtrack, so it was an opportunity to put out an EP, put the long version on there, and get some of that T-Bone Dixon stuff out to appease the fans.
Right, got you.
And we did it really quickly in 2 or 3 days, but I think if we would have gone into the studio with Clearmountain, had more time to experiment, I mean, let's face it, the guy's the best recording engineer in the business.
So you then did one more record for Geffen based on Happy Times.
That was sort of a, they had to let me make another record. It was in the contract. And after the song from the film didn't take off in 6 weeks, this is where I start to get all bitter and stuff. They didn't know what to do with me, and they A&R'd me to death, and I demoed 38 songs, and after putting me off for 2 years, they said, okay, go down to Ardent, make a record with these 2 engineers, the 2 guys who did Pleased to Meet Me for the replacement.
Right.
And the budget was $85,000, which I think was the second cheapest record they've ever made. The first one was a Victoria Williams record. And their mindset was, we didn't spend anything on this record. It must not be any good. But I love that record. That's my favorite record I've ever made.
Really? Okay.
Yeah, and those guys were great. Ardent was an amazing place. I just had the best time working with those guys. It's a little bombastic, a little over the top, but in retrospect, I really dig that. Then they came, and it came out. They just put it out and just sank it, and that was it, and I was dropped.
I know it's no good to lie and try to find a way out.
One more thing about Arden, though, that had to be cool to be. I mean, I'm sure you were a fan of Big Star and that kind of thing.
Of course, and Jody Stevens was there,
Right.
and everyone, and the high one amp that they used for September Girls was there, and that's all over the record.
Oh, that's great. That's great.
R.E.M. were next door, and they're friends of mine, so that's why Peter Buck plays on it, and hanging out with them. And Memphis is a really cool, funky city.
Sure, absolutely. Even to this day, it's great.
There's a lot
yeah.
of history and stuff there.
Right.
And I just had the best time. So, it was really hot. It was the summer of '88. I was there for about 6 weeks, and it was just so easy to do. These guys were so great. Let's get drum sounds in 10 minutes. Let's roll tape.
Right.
Where Emmerich would sit there for 5 days having the guy bang the snare drum and end up sounding like shit. So, whatever.
Oh, man.
One of the many highlights of Based on Happy Times was a cover of an old Beach Boys song called Our Car Club, which featured Tommy's buddy Peter Buck.
Yeah, he goes, well, I'm going to do the Beach Boy Club on Our Car Club. And I went, really? I haven't listened to that in a long time. It has really dumb words, but it was fun. And I kind of played the T-Rex riff on it, I was trying to get it to be like more T-Rex and less bouncy. So, and it was great.
The Based on Happy Times sessions also signaled the end of the original Tommy Keene band. Here once again is Ted Niceley.
Doug had hurt his back in between backs in this band. He busted a vertebrae and couldn't do the tour for songs from the film.
Okay.
But in between there, we did all this stuff. We did the appearance in the movie. We did the video for Listen to Me. We had this White Cold tour and the tour for songs from the film. And so we got this guy, Rob Brill, to play drums. He did the tour. And then, it was down to, writing more songs, demoing more songs, the original demos were based on Happy Times. It just kind of dissolved.
Another friend of Tommy's, Guy Picciotto of Fugazi, watched as things started to unravel.
So, and the other thing is, what major labels do is they just create all this, chaos within groups. I mean, he had Doug Tull, Ted, all these people who've been playing with him for a really long time. I mean, back to the Raz era. I mean, they'd had put in serious time together, and they had this great group sound. And then when that started to get disrupted, it just was really hard to watch from the outside, where you're just like, man, this is crazy what they're doing to this guy. It's like just putting him with. They just really mishandled the whole thing. It really drove me crazy at the time, and it drives me crazy now.
Right. I had heard somebody quoted as saying that Geffen was trying to turn him into the American version of Bryan Adams.
Right.
So it's like, guy, that's no, that's not what we're going for.
We continue the story with my interview with Tommy Keene.
And so, I mean, it's 1989, you get dropped, and then I noticed that the next thing you put out isn't until Sleeping on a Roller Coaster '92. I mean, did you take some time off to just kind of get away from all that and just,
No, what I did was I immediately regrouped with the, Tommy Keene group Mach 2, which had Brad Quinn from this band Carnival Season that I produced, and a drummer from Champaign, Illinois, and a couple guitar players. And we started, doing demos and recording. And a guy named Gerard Kozloy founded this label, Matador.
Right, okay, all right.
And so, Gerard always wanted to work with me. So in '89, '90, he said, I've just set up this label, and we're signing these bands. And I remember hearing Superchunk, Teenage Fan Club, and such. He said, but I want to do a label with a major label. So I've approached Island Records. So we had this whole deal with Island Matador Records, months, 100-page contract, blah, 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 blah. I get a call one day, deal's off. The guy has been fired for sexual harassment.
Ay.
Okay? So that took a year. Then cut to a guy who remixed a bunch of songs from the film named Bill Whitman. He was a guy in New York. He was an English guy. He had engineered the Cyndi Lauper record that was a big hit.
Okay.
The Hooters, the Outfield, bunch of big hits. But he was a really cool guy, and I really got along with him. And he loved the Who, and so he was then A&R at CBS. So here we go again. Okay, I want to sign you. So we do demos. He plays them for the boss. We drive up to New York in 1991. We play a showcase. It's all going to go good. We're going to sign. The guy, the head of CBS, he gets fired. At this point, Gerard says, let's just put out a record. Let's put out an EP. So, hence the 92 Sleeping on a Roller Coaster EP.
Now love is a dangerous thing. I knew I'd finally end your suffering. I'll probably be fine for a while. But she said love's the only thing I wanted in this life that I know.
So, I mean, what have you learned over the years from your dealings with record companies? Just completely stay away from the big labels? What,
No, just that it's a very tentative situation unless you actually are in the right place at the right time and make a lot of people money.
Right.
And the whole executive thing getting fired, I mean, everyone's been through that.
Sure.
Because they come and they go. If they're not making a lot of money for the suits and the accountants, they're out of there. Let's bring someone else in.
Right.
At major labels.
All the turmoil that Tommy had with major labels was certainly a lesson to younger bands. Here's Guy Picciotto.
And he was also kind of an object lesson for a lot of us younger musicians because he was one of the first people that we'd ever heard who'd signed to a major label. And he'd come back with stories about working with Jeff Emmerich and, from the engineer of the Beatles, and we'd all be freaking out. And then seeing, the experience that he had at Geffen was kind of like an object lesson in how gnarly things can get on a certain level within the industry. And Tommy was always really, a cool person to hear, like, all that kind of stuff from for someone who was coming up and starting to do music themselves.
Right, and I mean, you guys kind of very famously you were courted. Fugazi was courted many times, like, hey, we'd love to sign you, and time and again, you've kind of turned away from that. What was there any of that lessons from Tommy that maybe kind of made you go, yeah, maybe we're going to think twice about this?
I think we always had that in mind anyway, but certainly the Tommy's experience reinforced our kind of suspicion bordering on paranoia of the musical industry. And he had some great experiences, but he also had some really ridiculous experiences at the hand of people who really weren't understanding what he was doing.
After a couple of releases for Matador Records and then Spin Art, Tommy hooked up with Stephen Judge, who was helping run Yep Rock Records. Later started 1130 Records, then Second Motion, and finally School Kids Records.
Around that time, Angie Carlson, who was in Let's Active when she was married to Mitch Easter in the early days, was our publicist for Yep Rock. And she was dating John Worcester, the drummer of Superchunk. And John is a huge fan of Tommy's and had struck a friendship up with him, and they'd been friends over the years. And she came into my office and said, hey, John talked to Tommy Keene the other day, and he's working on a new record. I'm like, really? And she said, yeah, and he wanted to, he's shopping, and he wants to find somebody to put it out. And I was like, oh, my God, I would love to talk to Tommy. I hadn't talked to him in years. He probably wouldn't remember me, but that'd be amazing. And she gave me his number, and I called him, and that's it. That started it. So I put out Crashing the Ether on 1130, and that started, so I ran the label. I did everything. And it started a 12-year friendship and relationship.
Nice.
And I called him up. I called up Tommy, and I said, I called him, and he said, I'm all for it. Whatever you want to do, I'm with you. I was like, sweet. So that started it, and I've done every record ever since.
In October of 2010, I had a chance to interview Tommy for the very first time, and at the time, he was promoting a new best of.
Now, you have a brand new, the first ever career retrospective here. It's a double CD, and it's called Tommy Keene, You Hear Me. Now, that's a nod to one of your favorite bands. Is that true?
Yeah, very true.
The Who there, Tommy, Can You Hear Me? It's a little play on words there.
Well, you know, it's funny. I'm surprised that a lot of people don't like the title. I've never put out kind of a humorous album title, and friends of mine years ago were saying, you've got to put out a record called this. And, I'm surprised, actually, that so many people think it's really dumb.
No, I think it's great.
I thought it was kind of funny.
So, tell me, how long of a process of putting this whole thing together? How did this get started? The career retrospective, was it your idea? Did somebody come to you with the idea? How did that come about?
Well, this guy named Stephen Judge, who has a label called Second Motion, put out my last 3 records. We just thought it was about time to do something like this and sort of get all the different songs from different eras into an attractive package, and sort of a just summation of what had been happening so far. And it just felt like it was time and it was the right thing to do.
Call my name in the wind. Now I know just where you've been. When I say you've never really been gone.
Well, tell me about the track listing of the. It's in chronological order. Who picked it, and was it a difficult process?
I did it all.
You did it all. Okay.
I spent months and months selecting the songs, drafting, first draft, second draft. Basically, I picked the songs that I thought were the best in the canon, so to speak.
Okay. All right.
I could have gone the other route and picked a lot of unreleased stuff, but I decided I didn't want to go there. I picked the songs that I was the most proud of, and I know that there's stuff that people no one's going to be completely satisfied with this thing except me, and that was okay. And that's
right.
That was really
that's
what
fine.
I wanted to do. I mean, you know, everyone has their favorite songs. When I get a greatest or a best of collection by people, I go, oh, they didn't put this, they didn't put that. But basically, I just selected the songs that I wanted to be on there, and you know, 80% of it was very obvious.
Right.
There were certain songs that had to be on there. And then there was a bit of a creative leeway in there, and I just went with what I liked the best.
So tell me, you had a chance to listen to all these tracks, probably numerous times. You said you were sort of tinkering with the track listing.
Oh, yeah.
Did anything kind of...
Changed it till the very last minute in the mastering.
Right, okay. So, I mean...
No, I don't... You know, I had to make these, you know, last minute. I don't want that one on.
Right.
Put this one on.
Okay, all right. So I mean, was there, in listening to this stuff, was there things that sort of made you cringe and things you maybe forgot how good they were, or any of those kind of
If
feelings?
anything made me cringe, it did not make the record.
Okay, fair enough.
You know what I mean? There are some songs on my records that I don't care for and I regret, and I think I'm a pretty good editor when I went back through it all, and cringe moments were left on the cutting room floor.
Right.
When I fall apart, you'll face the world outside. But don't walk away until your feelings die.
A year later, in 2011, we touch base with Tommy again when he had just put out a new album called Behind the Parade.
I'm looking here in the inside cover. And I see the picture here, and you're sitting here, and you've got looks like you're a dog on a couch, and you know, and so it says here, CD recorded at home. So
right there where I was sitting.
Right there where you were sitting. I see recording gear, you know, around.
You can't see the board. The board is if you're looking at me, the board's to the left.
Okay, so that's...
You can't really see the board, but
okay.
You see the mic pre-compressor behind me, and of course a bunch of guitars, you know, littered around.
So is this the first time you've done a whole album at home kind of thing, or?
No. Starting with Crashing the Ether, for Crashing the Ether and the next record in the Late Bright, and some of the songs on the Pollard Keene Brothers record, we did the drums in that house, but upstairs. But starting in for Crash in the Ether, which came out in '06, but I started it in '03 or '04. I've done everything at home, including the drums. But for this current record, Behind the Parade, we went to a studio downtown here in L.A., did the drums. But I do everything else. I can do everything but drums or mix.
And you've been in some, like, super big time hotshot, studios through the years, and
Right.
and here you are recording at home and getting some amazing results, I must say.
Somebody should have sewn the buttons on her face. Nobody would have known how long they ran the race all the way to Factory Town.
Yeah, probably better than any of those places.
It's crazy how the
No,
technology...
I'm serious, the way technology has come down to the level where a sort of an idiot like me can navigate around recording a record.
Now, you've got you're recording at home. It sounds to me like that could be a mixed blessing. I mean, come on, like you said, you're recording at some of these really expensive recording studios. You're obviously, you look at your watch going, okay, we got to wrap this up kind of thing. When you're at home, you don't have to worry about that, but there's also, I don't know, it would seem to me that it would, since there's less of a sort of urgency to it, you can, well, I'll do that later kind of thing. You have any kind of problem like that, or?
No, and especially with this record, what I really wanted to do, I wrote it really fast, I recorded it really fast, and it came out relatively soon thereafter. And that's something that always plagues the indie artists or so, because you're always waiting for the record company's schedule. Some people say, why'd you take 3 years between records? Well, it wasn't really 3, it was 2 or 1.5, and then I had to wait for the record company to find a slot for it. But this one, I really pushed myself to just do it really fast and get it out really fast, because I had the retrospective out last year, and I wanted something to come out this year. And so I kind of raised the bar a bit. I just totally went for it and came up with 10 songs that I thought were all good. And I think I really pushed myself harder, and I think that was a good thing to do, because I think the record's pretty solid.
Still running for your life. And the goblins fill the night.
It's my favorite record of mine since Based on Happy Times.
Wow, that's cool, and it's very solid, I think, too. It's a good set of tunes.
For those looking to discover Tommy's music for the first time, a good place to start. There's a great YouTube video for Deep Sick Saturday, and it also has a great story behind it as well.
Have you seen the video?
Oh my God, the video! We're talking about that. Deep Sick Saturday is the first song on the record.
Sorry about the world that's tumbling down, but haze days will turn around. Selling of the souls happening now. I try to pull away somehow. Please show me how. We'll find a deep sick Saturday.
And you've got
I moved out of that house. I lived in that house.
okay, all right.
And we threw a big party. All the furniture was out. But we threw a big party, and we filmed the video at the same time. So it was really a blast.
Okay, so the guy in the bear suit, tell me where that came from.
Oh, that's my friend Matty. The guy who shot the pictures for the record, Chris Rady, he also did the pictures for In the Late Bright, called me up and said, I want to do a video. Would you guys be into it? Would you be into it? And I said, sure. And he had this idea for someone in a bear suit, kind of bringing people to the party. There's a friend of mine, Matt McLaughlin, who's really a funny guy, and I thought of him immediately, and he was way into it, and we had a meeting, and luckily the bear suit fit him. So
That was a prerequisite. Okay.
Yeah.
And so, it's worth seeing. You can go to TommyKeene.com and check it out there. And, I mean, it starts out, you're in a very old car. Your car or a borrowed car?
From the album cover, by the way.
The car from the album cover. Okay, right. All right.
The same as Cadillac.
Okay, nice. And then eventually, you've got this guy in a bear suit driving you around, singing and doing all sorts of things. And eventually you arrive at this house, and you say it's a house you used to live in that's empty.
Yeah.
Right. Okay.
We moved out the day after the video. The video was shot July 3rd. so we moved out actually July 5th, and just to a house right up the street. But it was a good send-off for the old
Sure.
house.
Sure, it looked like a fun time. So yeah, I highly recommend that.
Oh yeah, we had a blast.
So so what can you tell me about the actual song then?
Oh, what about it?
Yeah, I don't know. What the inspiration behind it, or I mean, because the whole term.
Well, the lyrics are kind of nonsensical. Because the Deep Six Saturday is really a funeral.
Okay.
And I've been talking to a lot of people about the song, and everyone wants to know about the horns.
Right.
And I had the song going, and I bet half of it written, and it just screamed out horns, sort of a 60s pop soul thing. And right from the get-go, I knew I was going to have horns in the song. And the horns really sort of make the song, I think, and because they're really uplifting and fun, and everyone really loves the horns. You know.
Right, and that's Chris Batista then, right?
Right, young guy, really good player.
And so this is something that while you were recording, I mean, when the idea pops in your head for the song and you start writing the song, immediately you sort of had the trumpet, or was this kind of in the final stages where you had an empty part where you could put any kind of solo down?
Well, on the ongoing song, I played the trumpet part on a keyboard.
Okay, all right.
But
okay.
when we got down near the end, we had him come in, and he listened to what I played and just nailed it.
Nice. Okay, and of course, in the video, the your friend in the bear suit plays the trumpet.
The bear plays it.
I love it. That's great. All right, can you tell me about one more tune? The other tune I really like is Nowhere Drag. Is there anything you can tell me about
my favorite song.
Oh, really? Cool.
Yeah. It's funny, I was talking to a guy the other day. The intro that fades up, I always got a real Smith vibe from that.
Okay.
This guy said it sounded like More Than a Feeling by Boss.
Well, they both fade up. I don't know. I think that may be where
I'm not insulted,
right?
But I never would have thought that.
Are you hitting the high notes like Brad Delp? No, I don't think so.
No. Yeah, that's my favorite song on the record. That was supposed to close the record because it's got the big coda and vamp and lead break, but I thought it was too good a song to have at number 10, so I moved it up in the sequence.
No, it's interesting.
But it's written in an open tuning. And there's a lot of layers of guitars, and the open tuning kind of dictated the melody line, and because it's just 4 chords, it's A, C, G, D. But when you have an open tuning, it just sounds a little different, and the voicings and the open strings ringing create a really nice effect.
No, absolutely. It's one of my favorites on the record too, as well. So
yeah.
All right, and people can find out more information. Your website, you get TommyKeene.com, and
then check me out on Facebook.
You do the you do updates. You do your own Facebook, or do you pay somebody to do that, or?
No, me and the bear.
You and the bear.
Bear comes in handy for a lot of things.
Nice. Yeah, trumpet playing, getting people to the party, and
Right.
Facebook. Right.
Driving.
I love it.
Yeah. Driving Miss Daisy.
Right. That's yeah. The video is definitely worth checking out. So that's
It's
cool.
a hoot.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So all right. Well, Behind the Parade, new CD from Tommy Keene. Good luck, and we'll look forward to seeing you out on the road, and we'll hope to talk to you again real soon. All right.
Right. Thanks so much.
The next time I talked to Tommy, he contributed to a tribute show I did to Reg Presley of the Trogs, who at the time had just passed away. Tommy had the good fortune of seeing the Trogs in concert.
Well, that's the interesting thing. I did see them live at a very historic show. I saw them open for The Who in 1968, and I was 9 years old. There was also 2 other bands on the bill, but obviously I went to see The Who, but I love the Trogs. I had a couple of singles. I think I only had that one album. Was it Love Is All Around?
Yeah, I think so, yeah.
Yeah, but then, no, I loved them. They were great. I remember they had the matching striped suits.
Nice.
Right, you know what I mean?
Right.
Very nice Carnaby Street kind of circa that era. I mean, sort of a little bit of a throwback to the mid-'60s where everyone wore uniforms, because the Who were in their kind of flowery minstrel period, pre-Tommy with the boiler suit. There's like Townsend still had his sparkly jacket on.
Oh, nice. Okay.
Yeah, so it was just an amazing show. And the Trogs played maybe 30 minutes. I'm trying to think. Those days, they had 4 bands on the bill. And they had 2 bands, one from Boston called, I know they had this album, I never bought it, they were called the Beacon Street Union.
Okay, no, that doesn't ring a bell. All right.
Well, they were kind of a local Boston band.
Okay.
Kind of whatever, and they were on the bill. And another group, Orpheus, I think. So, but the Trogs came on and did 30 minutes or maybe less. I mean, they really played the hits. Can't Control Myself, Love Is All Around, Wild Thing, of course, Girl Like You. But it was very, very cool.
The next time I talked to Tommy, it was later in 2013, and he was promoting his covers album, also referencing The Who, Excitement at Your Feet.
You are no stranger to covers. You've done them throughout your career. I mean, I look back to, like Places That Are Gone. You did Alex Chilton song, and you've done
right.
Lou Reed songs and Stones and Beach Boys, and just all through the years. You usually sprinkle in a cover here and there. So how long has this idea been brewing of an entire album of covers?
Actually, I don't like to give him that much credit, but the guy signed me to Geffen back in mid-'80s once he got to know me, and we'd trade stories about concerts we'd seen. So he said, you should do your pinups, which was the Bowie covers record. So he basically had the idea, and in fact, it was him who... We were playing a show, and I think we did a bunch of shows where we'd fly in potential producers and, to see if they'd want to do the Geffen record. And at one of those shows, we did Kill Your Sons because I'd gotten the Lou Reed Live in Italy record, and there's a great version of that on there. So it's real easy. We worked it up one night. We played it. He went crazy. He said, that has to be on the record. What is that? And I said, what's a Lou Reed song? So it ended up on Songs from the Film. Cut many years later, and I did a song last year for Slim Dunlap project because Slim's had a stroke and he's not doing too good, and Slim was in the replacements, of course. And so everyone was doing a song of Slim's. So I picked one, and a writer friend of mine heard it and said, why don't you do a whole record of covers? This is really interesting. And I had been writing songs, but I didn't know what my next move was going to be. So all of a sudden the light bulb went off. I said, no, I think now's the time.
But who's that calling my name over and over again? I say, let me dream if I want to.
It's kind of a gimmick. It's a little different. And I'd done 4 or 5 Tommy Keene original records in a row, and so I put the songs on hold, and I dove into this idea.
Now, how much mulling over the 11 tracks? Was there a lot left on the cutting room floor kind of thing? Did you try out other covers and went, or was it kind of an easy process?
Well, I noticed I said in former interviews, I whittled it down from 75 possibilities. That's not true.
75?
I was thinking. I knew immediately 3 or 4 songs I wanted to try. So it was just a couple evenings of listening and compiling and writing down ideas. And there were probably about 15 or 20 ideas, which I whittled down to 11. We did cut a rhythm track to a Beatles song. I did all the overdubs on this Beatles track, and I thought, no, I can't do this. It's just going to be one more guy singing a Beatles song. And I thought it was kind of a rocking track, but just, I don't know. It was a little bit of sacrilege in there. The song was Good Morning, Good Morning.
Oh, okay.
From Pepper. And so I ditched that, and I wanted to do a Smith song, but the more I thought about it, you can't sing Morrissey without sort of going into this kind of mimicry kind of, I don't know. It'd be tough.
Yeah, nobody does Morrissey quite like Morrissey. There's really,
Exactly.
Yeah.
I mean, and it was just sort of been a sort of, I mean, I could have done it completely straight in my voice, I guess, but I just thought best me not to tackle that one.
Right.
And there were some obvious. I'm thinking back now, and everyone's like, "Do Volume 2." And there was a couple obvious people that I just didn't think of. I mean, Costello. I should have done it. Maybe a Costello. I was thinking maybe a Psychedelic Furs.
Oh yeah.
But anyway, who knows? There might be a Volume 2. We'll see.
Was there an attempt to go, all right, I really like this band, but I want something that isn't so obvious? Was that kind of the mindset going in? For instance, something like the Stones, that you pull off "Ride On Baby." That is about as obscure in a song as you can get. I mean, it's like side 2 of Flowers. It's like that's.
I know what you mean. No, never, because I loved that album when it came out as a kid. And in junior high and high school bands, we did that song endlessly.
Okay, all right.
For us, that was a hit. Now, it might seem that I had a little piece of paper and said, okay, The Who, Rolling Stones, what's the most obscure song? To me, maybe subliminally I did that, but The Who, the power poppy kind of songs on that first album, Much Too Much, La 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 Lies, Good's Gone, always was very influential on me. And I couldn't do any Who song later in their career because they started singing really operatically, and once Tommy came in and Daltrey became this sort of big lead singer with the screaming and all that stuff. It's just vocally it didn't suit me. So maybe I was just drawn to what I knew I could pull off.
No, that makes sense, and much too much comes from my generation too. So that's now you've done so much melodic music over the years. If we were to sort of trace the roots back, you mentioned being influenced by The Who and a lot of that early kind of power pop stuff. Big Star, big influence as well, kind of thing?
Oh, yeah. I'd heard of them as a teenager when those records were out, and I remember reading about them, but the records weren't anywhere. It wasn't as if no one I knew had them, and it wasn't as if I could just walk in the record store and there it is, Radio City. So late in the 70s, I think, when their whole revival thing started to happen, the people like Chris Stamey and Mitch Easter and Hole Zappel and all those gang were sort of really beginning a grassroots sort of renaissance for them with New York rocker and the whole New York scene in Hoboken. And then I said, I want to get into these. And a friend of mine put the first 3 albums on a cassette. Now we're at like 79, I think, or 80. So that's when I was first, and I just went crazy. I said, oh my God, how could I have missed this?
At night time, I go out and see the people. Air goes cool and hurrying on my way. And dressing so sweet, all the people to see. They're looking at me, all the people to see.
And then I ended up opening for Chilton about 12 shows in 87 when he started after the Replacement song, and he became kind of a big club draw on his own and his kind of funky 3-piece band. So I knew that was a super obvious choice, but I've always wanted to. I've done that song for so long, Nighttime, and I thought it would be perfect for the project.
The one that sticks out that was like, wow, that's cool is the Bee Gees. Pull off of Odessa, which is a really underrated album from them. Not everybody knows how fantastic that album is too. So
yeah,
but
there are no hit singles really in
right.
the U.S. from that record, and I think they're in between their glory days and the resurgence starting with Jive Talking.
Right, exactly.
Kind of a lost record.
Indeed. So, and was that an obvious choice too, or would you know?
That was that was a little left field. I think I was going through the bins, and I thought, because I love the early Bee Gees, the first 4 records. I guess First, Horizontal, Idea, and Odessa, and those records were so big in my world in the late '60s. 67 to 1969, I would say. I just played them constantly, and I just always loved Odessa. Has it's a double album, and it's got, there were several choices, and I just thought that would be cool. Let's see if I can sing one of them, and I found one I could sing.
Right.
Just because the gives, they're 3-part harmonies and all this stuff, and even though there's a lot of orchestration, I knew I could sort of pull that off with just a mellotron and piano and sort of more stripped down version. But yeah, that was a real obscure one. But that's probably what you're going to get from me. I mean, if someone says do a Bee Gees song, I'm not going to do Staying Alive or even Massachusetts or
right.
Love Somebody. I mean that. So I just kind of didn't see the point in that.
Right. No, absolutely.
Yeah. But that was that's the one that throws most people. It's funny you bring that up.
Right.
Because A, they've never heard the record, B, they don't like the Bee Gees, and C, they've never heard the song, and they're thinking, So, yeah, that's the most left field choice, I think.
I mean, it's interesting. You have spent your last few years kind of looking back. I mean, you had the 2 CD retrospective, and this is almost kind of a companion piece to that. It's like, okay, well, here's my career, and here's what I was influenced by, kind of thing. So
right, and the other thing is, if there's this DVD project, which has been in the works for years, and that's going to be the same thing. That's going to be sort of because I have live stuff from, I think the first, I say 82 at the Peppermint Lounge opening for Translator. I have a whole set.
Wow.
Because all those new wave clubs in those days had video, the 930 Club, the New York clubs, and they would just put a tape in and run it. When the whole video thing came in, it was like, oh, you got to go to the bathroom? That's okay. While you're standing there, you don't have to miss a thing.
Right.
Right? So I've got all this stuff, and in 1990 we did a little East Coast, about 6 shows, and I think it was, someone had one of those VHS cameras, big bulky things, and so we just brought it along, and this friend of mine filmed a bunch of stuff. And so anyway, we did a little mini mockumentary, kind of on the road, stupid thing, which is actually kind of funny.
So this is coming out? You've got this sort of DVD project?
Yeah, it's just, I need to find someone, if anyone's out there, a real savvy editor sort of wants to be involved in making a film. I mean, I put out a couple feelers. I mean, I live in Filmville, USA, but I don't really know that many movie people, but I have been kind of cleaning house. I don't know.
Stephen Judge of School Kids Records would still like to see this video project become a reality.
I was trying to find somebody local in Los Angeles. This was one of the last conversations I had too, and I've been calling our publicist, Carrie Baker, who lives in LA, and because Carrie's actually working 6-String Drag, who I'm putting out next year. He's our publicist for that as well. And in the same conversation, I said, he asked how Tommy was doing. This is just 2 weeks ago. I think 2 weeks before us. And I said, good. He's writing new songs. And I was like, actually, you might be able to help me. I'm trying to find someone in L.A. who can rip VHS to digital because I don't want Tommy mailing all those VHS tapes somewhere. I'm worried they'll get damaged.
Yeah.
And my old college roommate, Chris Rady from NC State, was the guy that took all the photos for Tommy's bus. From In the Late Bright, he took the album cover for Behind the Parade. In the Late Bright, he made the video for Deep Six Saturday.
Oh, wow, okay.
And he was my college roommate and is in L.A. as a photographer, just total coincidence. And I actually was going to call him and ask him if he knew anybody, and I just hadn't gotten around to it. That was my post-holidays task,
right.
To really try to bring it together because Tommy had gotten to a point where he was like, I don't know what else I can do at this point. I'm kind of frustrated.
Right.
I've gotten as much done as I can.
Right.
And I was trying to help him take it to the next step.
Right. Well, that's cool.
Which I'll continue to try to do.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, I think that would be the logical thing if you could wrangled
Oh,
all
yeah.
that stuff together. I mean, that would be a
Oh,
great,
yeah.
great tribute.
Yeah, it meant a lot to Tommy, so I got to figure that out for sure.
In addition to playing his own music, Tommy lent his guitar playing to a multitude of artists, including Paul Westerberg, the Goo Goo Dolls, the Gin Blossoms, and in 2014, he worked with Dwight Twilley on his album Always. Here's Dwight Twilley on Getting Hooked Up with Tommy Keene.
Particularly on that album, it was the first album that I did since Bill Picciotto IV passed away, and it was kind of like having a carpet pulled out from under you. A lot of people were suggesting to us that, we worked so much with Bill on everything that, maybe it, it might be a good time to reach out to all these friends we have. And so Tommy was one of the people that we called on. And I think the one that I liked best was one of the songs on there called Everybody's Crazy.
Because everybody's crazy, and it's killing me, baby.
Okay. Yeah, I like that's a great tune too. So,
Yeah. I feel kind of honored to have his work on one of my records. I didn't appreciate it as much as I thought of. Should have, let's say, at the time. But now I just feel honored that I was able to have him make some noise on one of my discs.
The Icon Fetch podcast is put together in Dayton, Ohio, home also to Bob Pollard of Guided by Voices. And Bob and Tommy put out a series of records under the Keene Brothers name. And I wanted to know how Tommy got hooked up with Bob.
A friend of mine who's a writer, I'd read that he was a fan of mine, and I've always been a big Guided by Voices fan. I read that Bob was a fan of mine, and this guy was interviewing Bob, I think in like 2002, and he brought me up, and Bob said, "Oh, I love that guy, blah, blah, blah," and he said, "Why don't you work with him?" And next thing I knew, I had a guy from Bob's label, Fading Captain, call me up and go, "Bob's really interested in making a record with you." And so then I talked to him on the phone. I'd seen them live a bunch of times. I'd never met him. And he said, "Well, let's do a record. Here's how it works. You write the music. You send it to me. I'll write the lyrics and the melodies, and I'll do the vocals." So in the interim, I hit him up for a couple opening for GBV shows in 2003. And then in 2004, he called me and he said, "We got to put this record on hold because I'm breaking up Guided by Voices, and we're doing this big, last tour, and I'm in the midst of doing a double solo album."
Oh, okay. All right.
So then I hit him up for some more opening slots. So then I said to him, "If you're breaking up the band, I'd love to play in your band." And he said, "Really?" So then I ended up playing with him guitar and keyboards at his first solo tour in 2006, and then the record, we eventually came back and we finished the record, and that came out that spring as well.
The last time I talked with Tommy Keene, he had just put out his last studio album, Laugh in the Dark.
Your last record was 2011 of original material. Did you kind of take a break then, or does the songwriting process just never really stop for you?
No, I definitely take breaks. I can go 8 months without, unless I'm playing a show or playing with various people. I can go 8 months without seriously picking even up a guitar.
Wow.
I read that about Jeff Beck once, which he's sort of the master, and I guess that's because he likes to tinker around on vintage automobiles and stuff.
Nice.
So, no, they're definitely. There's a period of just sort of not trying to mess with the muse, so to speak, to let things kind of build up, and then once you sort of get into the day-to-day working, as I might call it, things have sort of built up.
Now, do you think any of that immersing yourself, kind of being very purposeful about immersing yourself in your influences kind of thing, you think that rubs off at all either?
Well, I think the influences are always there. Maybe it sort of brought a few more things to the surface, so to speak.
Okay, all right. And I also heard that this album is kind of unique in the songwriting process in that they're all new, right? Is that right?
Well, new and the fact that I sort of compiled them in a shorter period of time than usual.
There are times where on your previous records you've reached back and like pulled something from way back. You didn't really kind of do any of that this time.
No, not that on this record. Or I would start with a cover version, sort of just get me going in the demoing, song constructing process. Do you know what I mean?
Right.
Just get me working, basically. Just sort of, working on new songs, whether I wrote them or not.
Well, in this, you had, instead of just one cover song, you had whole album
record. Yeah.
So you're good,
so
good and warmed up, right? Yeah. So.
Right. Yeah, I was warmed up.
Right.
I don't really know. I'm just holding on for my life.
The disc opens with "Out of My Mind."
I could never leave this all behind. You're out of my mind.
Is there anything you can tell me about that, the writing process, or anything like that?
Oh, that's kind of a sentiment I guess could be construed as either a relationship. I could always leave this far behind, but then I'd go out of my mind where I'd regret my decision. It could also be taken as my involvement in music. I mean, I don't know how much longer people are going to want to keep putting out my records. It's just sort of the question of the unknown, and would I miss this? Would I move on to something else? That kind of feeling, I think, was what I was trying to get at.
Right. Yeah. It reminds me of the end of Spinal Tap, where they're asking the guys what they would do, and the one guy said he'd work in a haberdashery.
Yeah. That's my favorite is, there's always sex and drugs.
Right. Well, what's cool is, track 1 and 2 kind of bleed right into each other, which I thought was cool. It's like, kind of begs you to listen to them all at once. And that's
a crossfade, yeah.
Right, nice. And that's Dear Heloise.
Dear Heloise, I am riding with these. If the world is a song, then I want to belong. Heloise.
When I think of that, I think of the column for housewives kind of thing.
Oh, right. Well, there's sort of a take on that, and then the Holly song, Dear Eloise.
Oh, right. Yes, absolutely. Which you did, didn't you? You covered that on a Holly's tribute album, didn't you? I thought you did.
No, we did Carrie Ann.
Okay, all right. Well, I see. It was one of the girls. Sorry, I got that.
Right.
They had lots
I just started singing that line when I was coming up with those chords, and the rest of the song is purely just fiction. But I mean, that's not a really famous Holly song, although it was a hit. I remember seeing them do it on Ned Sullivan when I was a little kid. And they had Graham Nash sort of sitting there with his quill pen and I guess he was sort of supposed to be, from 100 years ago. Dear Eloise, I'm writing, blah, 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 blah. So I copped a bit of that line because it just sort of came to me naturally when I was playing those riffs. And then I pretty much just made up a little story after that.
Now, I noticed, you got Laugh in the Dark.
Send a chill up your spine. How could you know I changed my mind? Only wanted to see this, but darling, it's just inside the big time race.
And I was reading that's actually kind of a throwback to amusement park, back to when you grew up kind of thing?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there was an amusement park outside of D.C. area called Glen Echo. And it's the same place. Well, the park was open, I think till about the late 60s. And I went there as a little kid, I think on my 7th birthday. But it was 20 minutes from our house, and it was sort of the D.C.'s premier amusement park. In fact, there's a lot of history there. In the 60s, it was closed down for a while. They had race riots during the civil rights movement, because I'm sure they had a policy of, that was totally whites only or something like that, ridiculous. But there was a ride called Laugh in the Dark, and it was this old-time sort of spook house thing where you'd get in these cars that had these high backs to them, and they would go around on these circular tracks in the dark, and all of a sudden they'd come up in front of a mirror, and lights would flash on, and there would be like a funhouse mirror, and this insane laughter was echoing all throughout the room, and it ran on these little, well, you know, the electricity obviously created these little sparks that you would see in the dark. It was pretty insane, but I've always remembered that, and I was, you know, thinking of a title, and then I wrote the song "Laugh in the Dark," and I said, well, that obviously should be the title of the record.
Right. Yeah. That it sounds like you were scarred back when you were 7 years old.
It was fun though, but when you think about it now, it's kind of very strange. You're just basically in the dark, moving around and on these tracks and stuff, and you know other cars are in the room at the same time, so you hear people yelling and stuff.
Right. Huh. A couple more I want to ask you about. Go Back Home is interesting because you kind of break out the slide. I don't know if I've heard you do a lot of slide guitar kind of thing.
I can't go back to pins and needles. I'm off the track to where I really want to be.
No, it's funny. When I joined this band called Raz in D.C. when I was 19, they were kind of Stones, bluesy aficionados, besides writing their own material. And I had to take this crash course in slide playing. I remember we did this Randy Newman song called Lucinda, which I had to play this slide part, which was very reminiscent of Mick Taylor and Love in Vain.
Nice.
Stones.
Okay.
And we also did High Flying Baby by the Flamin' Groovies, which was open tuning in a slide part. So I've kind of had to learn real quickly how to do it back then. And it's just kind of fun. And when I wrote this song, it sounded kind of like a song from Led Zeppelin 3. And I just said, oh, this would be great if it had an open tuning kind of slide guitar bit. That was so much fun to do, too. And it's a bit of a departure for me. It's bluesy. And, yes, I say in the bio, that's one of the songs I'm kind of really proud of because it's a bit different.
Right, and there's no drums on it, so it definitely has that kind of. It does have that Zeppelin 3 kind of feel to it, definitely.
Right.
Yeah, that's cool.
The acoustic side.
Yep. Now the album closes with "All Gone Away." And it's like a great sort of 6-minute jam to end out the record. And you know, I'm hearing like early Pink Floyd maybe, but then I mean there's obviously a nod to some of the chords do sound like Dear Prudence from the Beatles too, kind of
right.
So
it's your classic descending scale in a droney open chord. And I had the song and I was doing overdubs, and that riff, the Dear Prudence riff, just came out, and I remember playing it for Brad Quinn, who was in town, and he was playing bass and doing vocals on the record. I said, "Can I get away with this?" He said, "Oh yeah."
Nice.
Do you know what I mean? I mean, I could, if you gave me 10 minutes, I could come up with 15 songs that have that riff in it.
Sure. Oh yeah. I mean, there's not. It's not.
But I just thought it sounded really cool. I said, yeah. I mean, it doesn't. It's not note for note, and it's in a different time signature. But once again, that was one decision on the record where maybe after doing the covers, I just said I'm going to throw this out there, and I thought I liked the sound of the riff, and it just added to the song so much. I just said, "Oh, forget it."
Yeah,
because I played for a couple people. They said, "Don't worry about it."
Well, I mean, come on. I'm sure if
it's a tip of the hat, of course.
Sure. And I mean, there's only so many great riffs written, and if you're gonna mimic them, you might as well mimic one of the best ones. I don't know. It's like
right.
So, tell me, you're hitting the road for the new record then?
Yeah. It's coming up in a couple weeks. We're going to do 4 dates in the Midwest and 4 dates on the East Coast, and then sometime later in the year, I'm going to play Los Angeles and probably San Francisco.
Yeah, when it's warmer there, you know, you don't want to be touring, you know, Rochester in February or something like that, right?
I've done that. I remember one time we played New York City in January, and we pulled into New York. There was a foot and a half of snow, and then the next day we drove 8 hours to Rochester in a blizzard whiteout, and got there. It's the only time I've ever. No, I played there later. Well, 2 times I played Rochester, and we played to like 30 people on a Sunday night.
So you drive there in a blizzard for 8 hours and you play for 30 people.
Mm-hmm.
That's rock and roll, baby.
The next day we had
Right.
to drive to Columbus, Ohio, or something ridiculous.
Right,
So,
right.
Yeah.
Yeah, I know. It's the rock and roll lifestyle, baby. That's what it's all
funny
about.
Because someone on my web or Facebook or one of the pages said, "When are you going to play Rochester?" That just reminded me of that time. And to top it off, I think I was sick too.
Oh,
So
man. Yeah.
freezing in the back of this van, driving to, But the show was good. People liked it.
Nice. Yeah, well, hey, you know what? You make 30 people happy. That's good.
Well,
so.
I don't think many people play Rochester in February, but
Right, exactly.
in this land of snow.
Right.
In wrapping up the tribute, Guy from Fugazi talks about some of Tommy's talents.
The thing about Tommy, I think what was so interesting about him was just like he was really self-deprecating and kind of a humble person, but he had so many skills. Like I think his guitar playing is crazy underrated. I mean, like songs like Mr. Roland, like his version of Kill Your Sons, all that stuff. Obviously, incredible guitar stuff that he would do live on those songs. But then just the songwriting and then the singing and then the kind of general vibe, like his whole. I think he had this like really interesting melancholy that was the part of him that they found unmarketable, but to me was so interesting. Like he had this power pop thing with this like strain of sadness in it that was like really kind of, I don't know, for me really unique and beautiful. And I was a huge fan.
Ted Niceley, who was in Tommy's band, looks back on things.
Being a great artist and becoming a great big artist are 2 completely different animals. And Tommy and I talked about this all the time over the last 3 years. It's not good enough to be great. You got to have a great manager. You got to have people that know how to work the record label. You got to have people that know how to go to a fucking marketing meeting, and talk to people. And you had to have somebody besides the A&R guy that could go to the president of the record company or the senior vice president and plead your case because, after a while, the A&R guy can't do it anymore. I think people that are really honest, are doing this for the love of music, and that was my whole thing in the end. I was, talking to people in the first couple of days after Tommy died, and I was like, look, Tommy wasn't hung up in all this fucking shit anymore. He was doing what he wanted to do, and he was playing his songs, and he liked it. He liked going places. He liked going to Japan. I mean, come on, man. It's great.
Peter Buck talks about the last time he saw Tommy Keene.
Last time I talked to Tommy was 3 weeks ago, and we were still talking about new bands, and he came to see Filthy Friends, and he was, I saw him with Matthew, and he was just so excited that I was excited about his new band, and he thought the songs were great, and was just beaming with happiness. And it's the last thing I remember. It's so great you're doing this.
Stephen Judge of Second Motion and School Kids Records talked to Tommy a lot in his last days, and he was working on new material.
So I'll give you the timeline. We spoke off and on pretty regularly as he was touring with Matthew Sweet before he went out on the first leg, because he'd toured with Ivan Julian earlier this year. So then after that was over, and the Matthew Sweet stuff popped up, we were talking about a bunch of different projects, and in between the 2 Matthew Sweet tours, they had a little bit of time off. We had a couple of really long conversations, and he had said to me, I said, listen, because we've been working on a DVD, he had tremendous amounts of archive stuff. I can't even remember how many VHS tapes he had of live shows, and then I got Carson Ether rights back, and he ironically got Spinart and Matador release rights back. And so we controlled that digitally and physically. And I said, okay, let's not just throw it out there. Let's come up with a strategy and a plan on how we want to do this. And right before he went on that second leg, he said, totally, And I said, I think we should do a retrospective on vinyl, maybe do a Pledge Music campaign or put it out on Record Store Day or something cool like that. And he loved it, but he also said, but I want to do a new record. I'm really feeling it right now. I'm feeling inspired from these tours this year and the Trump stuff too, and really was ready to put something down. And he said, because I've been touring so much, I haven't had time to write. So when I'm done with the second leg of Messy Sweet, I'm going to completely focus on writing. And I said, sweet. And I said, well, we still can put something out in the spring or Record Store Day. And then, because he said, yeah, it'll be like, the fall of next year before it actually can come out. He goes, if I can finish writing before Christmas. I said, yeah, exactly. And, or, first of the year, get the record done. I think he already had all the ideas in his head. He just wanted to get them down.
Right.
And the last conversation, because of Black Friday being so busy for me, we were trading messages back and forth, trying to set up a time to talk about all this. And he had been writing me messages like, I think we should do Crash the Ether. And he could feel he was really excited about this idea. And we were going to get all the records up digitally, because right now those records aren't up digitally, and I needed to get all the assets from them because I didn't even have copies of some of those records myself. And he was busy and I was busy, and we were just trying to find the time to sit down. And the last message I got from him was Monday, saying, no problem, man. Just call me when you can. I'm up late working on new songs. And I said, sweet. So he was definitely writing, but he never got anything down. So Tommy was a late night person. He would stay up extremely late, and that was, I think, when his partner was asleep, that was his time to kind of put all of his ideas down.
Right.
And so he was doing that, but there's not going to be anything. There's nothing recorded, unfortunately.
I thought it fitting to let Tommy Keene have the last word on his career.
I just make music for myself, and I hope other people like it. I mean, that is so simplistic, but basically that's it. If I'm satisfied, this is a record that I would like to hear, and that's why I'm writing it and putting it out. And hopefully, there are other people in the same boat.
Thanks for listening to this tribute to Tommy Keene. I'd like to thank Josh Grier and Stephen Judge, who both had Tommy signed to their record labels, Guy Picciotto of Fugazi, Peter Buck of R.E.M., Ted Niceley, who played in Tommy's band, and Dwight Twilley, who Tommy provided guitar for. Tommy may be gone, but his music lives on.